also going to share with us his new book, Freelance to Freedom. Vince, welcome to Game Changing Dads.
How are you doing, buddy? It's great to be here.
I am doing awesome. Great to meet you in person, or should we say Zoom face-to-face.
That's right.
If you can take, and this is how we start out the show, if you can take a couple minutes and give us a snapshot of where you grew up, some of your crazy, your crazy growing up moments, getting through school, meeting your wife and your family, and then ended up on where you are today.
Gotcha. Yeah, absolutely. I was born in Queens, New York, not that far from you in Philly, and moved to Long Island. I was about 9 years old, and I had a typical suburban upbringing, but at the same time, I didn't. My dad had a business that when I was 15 years old, his partner in one day cleaned out all the accounts and left.
Wow.
And so my normal life that I was used to, going to school, friends, everything got flipped upside down in a day. I came downstairs and my dad was, on the couch, just shot, trying to so everything, it really changed everything for the next 10 years of my life. Between my relationship with my family, I didn't get along with them. They didn't get along with me. After that, they had so much struggle they were going through. I fought with my dad consistently, saw all the money problems that came with that, and really kind of affected in a good way for the future how I looked at life and family and money. So I'm grateful for all the pain that we went through, but it really flipped it upside down, like going to college. None of that really mattered at that point. Grades in school, I just didn't care anymore. Ran away a few times, and it wasn't until I was 23, 24 when life really kind of hit the bottom in my mind that I shifted it and was able to get into photography that really kind of saved me in a lot of ways and gave me a purpose and something to do.
Wow. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let me get back to, your father, business partner cleared you out, man. What a crazy story. And I know, my father's background when he first started in business, he had a silent partner, and there was some crazy things going on in that partnership. For you seeing that at such a young age, what was your trust level like that, and your family on trusting other folks?
It made it really, I don't know if I ever really kind of thought about it in terms of the trust part of it. I don't know if I was the most trusting to begin with. You grew up in New York, and everybody, it wasn't your leave it to Beaver type of, environment. Even though we lived in a good neighborhood, there was nothing wrong with it, but it was more cynical. The friends that I hung around with, I didn't hang around with a great crowd at all, which contributes. As you get older in life, you start the whole Jim Rohn quote. You're the average of the 5 people you hang around with. Well, I chose a lot of the wrong people to hang around with, and that's not their fault. It was my fault. But what it taught me a lot in terms of trust, like I guess in terms of trust in business, we never wanted a partner. Even when we had an opportunity with our photography business to bring on associates and grow it. But I think I always had a hurdle there in terms of internally of what happened in terms of what can happen when you bring on a partner. So I think I was frightened by that.
Absolutely. And the reason I bring that up, watching my father have a partner and then hearing the dinner conversation a lot was, hey, don't trust anyone else. And hey, growing up in Philly, I don't know how New York was, but it was like, once you left the family, you keep everything to yourself. You have a great idea, keep it to yourself. It wasn't until I was like maybe in my late 20s where, Robert Kiyosaki and sharing business ideas and doing partnerships. And I totally understand the partnerships because I've lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in bad investments through friends and, welcome to the game. But I think I did eventually get over that, but it for some reason, and I love my family, not to disrespect, but it was almost like, hey, when you get out there, my first company at 18 years old, don't trust anyone. You do your own thing and don't listen or trust anything. And I'm like, listen to guys like you, like I want to learn how to publish a book. And so, as we get older, you had said this earlier, we start to learn and we start to open up a little bit, which is crazy.
Absolutely, because I had the same mindset in terms of like you don't share your ideas unless it's yours, and we are pretty much the exact opposite now.
Awesome.
It is you give, and I had to learn that the hard way. It wasn't a tit for tat. You give to get. It wasn't like you do for this what they did for you. It's very much of like the mindset of you give and you help, and good things come back to you. And
And
really,
you don't have a chalkboard in your office, right? So, hey, me and Vince, I'm up Vince for 3 little checks. And, now you need to come back and me because I'm done. And that's how it was in my family,
you have a
which is
score.
horrible.
You're
Yeah.
keeping score. And
Yeah.
first of all, I think it's bad for your heart. I think it's bad
Amen.
for you as a person, because you're constantly comparing or wondering or resentful, because even when you do stuff, you're still thinking, what are they going to do back for me, or what they didn't do for you? So even when you do it, you're doing it you have a reason for it. You have a motive, which I don't, and I grew up like that. And I did that for a really long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Yeah, that's powerful, but I'm glad to see you're growing and changing. And honestly, that's why you're on Game Changing Dads right now. Tell us about photography. Did you have a mentor, or did you just, see an advertisement or a commercial and just, hey man, that seems like a great way to go?
No, what happened was is a lot less glamorous than anything. What happened was I was working at a convenience store, and I had worked at Record World, a record factory. Remember Record World way back in the day? They like, and it was like they sold albums, cassettes, and I worked there, and I would steal the tapes, and I would give them to my friends. I didn't even keep them for myself. It was just kind of I'm an 18-year-old punk, and it was kind of the thrill of it. And I didn't even collect them. I gave them to people, but that was kind of maybe just with my childhood and how just kind of angry I was. It was just maybe, I don't know what it was, why I did it. But then I got another job, and I would steal from there too. I would steal from the customers, and this is embarrassing to talk about it, but actually helps going forward. And then one night, I woke up, and I had moved back with my parents because I wasn't doing that well. And I woke up in a nightmare, cold sweat, that I got caught stealing again. And
Wow.
I went downstairs, and I get choked up thinking about it. But I went downstairs, and I was sitting at the kitchen table, and I was like, what am I doing with my life? Like, I'm 22 years old, and I'm a thief, and I work at a convenience store, and I'm living with my parents. And I'm like, what? And my dad came downstairs, and he said, he could tell. And me and my dad still, since that time when he lost that money, we fought up until that point, consistently. And he looked at me, and he knew something was wrong. I said, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. And that's the first time I ever thought about it, And he said, well, you like taking pictures, you like traveling, you like sports. Why don't you take a photography class? It's 2:15 in the morning, right?
Wow.
And I said, well, I've never tried anything in my life. I never tried in school. I said, but I said, I know I'm going to fail. So I failed at everything. I said this to myself, literally there. I said, but at least I'm going to fail at something cool. I'm not going to take another job that I don't want. Like, I'm going to try this. I'm going to do this. So I bought a camera the next day, and I would buy tickets to a Yankees game or a Met game, and I would sneak down to the front row. I would learn how the ushers walked. So I would walk right behind them, and then I would sit down halfway down when they would go to the field, and then they'd come back up. And as soon as they passed me, I'd be in the front row of every game, like that second inning. And I'm taking pictures, and what would happen, all the professional photographers would be in front of me. So I would start asking them questions. What kind of film are you using? What do you do this? How do you get a job in this? So every night I'd go there, and I'd ask them questions. And, most of them a lot of them ignored me. A lot of them kind of told me not to do it. And some of them were very helpful. And that's pretty much how I got started in terms of learning photography.
Now, check that story out. So Vince, I mean, you did, you gave up on yourself early on, but your father planted that seed. And parents, you're out there listening to this, planting seeds with your kids, whether they're going to believe it or not, you're planting, whether they get it or not. Man, what a huge 18 years old. I remember I was working for a company during the summers, landscaping. And my mom says to me, you need to start your own business. You need to go into landscaping. I said, Mom, I got way too many responsibilities. And she's like, you're living at home. What is it? I have a girlfriend. I almost blew my chance of having my first company having a girlfriend. But she planted a seed. And I remember a couple months down the road going, yeah, that would be a cool deal. But he planted, and I don't know if he poured into you, be like, hey, take that class and just keep going, keep going. But all of a sudden there was something that stirred up, especially if you're making attempts to get into the field, talk to the right people. How did your friendships and the people you associated change from that point on? Let's say 22 and on, because that seems like things started gearing up for you.
It did. I started hanging around with the people that I hung around with started kind of, they weren't as into it, me doing what I was doing. So now I was
Mm-hmm.
spending nights and going out. I wasn't going out as much to the bars and to the clubs, and I was actually going to just games to take pictures. And I remember, I did a project when I was in school, which wasn't that far afterwards. And I went on a New York City subway for 30 days straight to do a story about the F train. I wanted to do a documentary. So I spent 8 hours a day in this filthy subway car for myself, for my project, during break of schools, Thanksgiving and New Year's. And I remember just a bunch of my friends being like, why are you doing that? Like, they were kind of getting annoyed at me that I wasn't going out. And one friend was like, I would have just went there one day, took some pictures and said I was done. And I remember thinking, that's not the point. The point is actually to create this, to make this happen. And that story that I shot won me eventually first place in the William Randolph Hearst National Championship when I left college. That catapulted everything in my career. But that was 30 days of working for free on my own project just for myself because I had a vision of it, when everybody else was kind of like, just go get a job. And I'm like, I'm kind of have a job, it's not getting paid yet. Like, I kind of knew that, but so the association started changing for sure.
Absolutely, man. What a great story. And yeah, the working for free, I get it, been there, done that. And yes, so I guess I was 18, 19, and my parents said, why don't we go get a truck, get something used, we'll invest a little money. And yeah, my friends, all of a sudden, man, they're, what are you doing? Oh, well, we're going out to the, you mentioned the bars and the clubs, and yeah, none of that. Hey, I have to get up early, I have a job tomorrow. So everything started to change, which good for you implementing and continuing that.
I just
awesome.
feel like, I think, thank you. I just feel like, there comes a point where we kind of go, I've had it. I'm done. I'm done doing this. But I have it now. And I coach people on this, but there's people that they come to me and I can just tell they're not ready yet. So I used to want to push them. You have to do this. No, I don't. Like, when you are ready, you'll come back. You might never be ready. You might be fine with this for the rest of your life. A lot of people are, but there's a lot of people who are not, they want more. So when you're ready, that's when every time I've done the work is when I've been ready to do it.
Did you ever look back and say, man, I wish I grew up in a different way? I know when I look back, I grew up in the hood of Philadelphia. They didn't call it bullying back in the day. They just called it getting mugged. I don't know if you had muggings up there, but getting beat up and mugged. But as the older I get, the more I look back, but it taught us a great message. And you're saying that to the people that are coming to your masterminds or coaching, because we can tell the shade. I know we can tell shady people right off the bat. We can tell in there, we can look in someone's eyes within like 30, 40 seconds, and we know what's up.
Well, that's the thing. I think, not to, say I live, Pittsburgh now, I lived in Indiana, but there's something about living in New York where it's like that in Philly, where you kind of get a street smarts that people kind of go, how'd you see that? Like, you could just see it. You just kind of, it's funny. I just saw this thing about photographers and I didn't know this. They did brain scans and people are always like, how do you see that on TV? Like the brain is wired differently when you shoot for a certain period of time because your eyes are always moving and paying attention to things, that the activity within the brain of a photographer is so much more active. And I was like, really? And I think it's kind of the same thing with this. Like, you just can kind of tell a lot of times when something's maybe it's just, we're not as, trusting and you kind of just see it from the upbringing. But I don't look back on it with any regret. I got mugged when I was 14 in front of Grand Central Station in New York, going to a Metallica concert. Knife to my throat and with my friends all around. I've had that stuff happen. And thank goodness I survived and we survived. But man, I joke about it, it makes for some good stories.
It does, absolutely. And it makes us who we are, so we can share those experiences with our kids and our family, which, my wife just cringes when I bring up a story from back in the day. I'm like, we need to go past the old neighborhood and go through the old neighborhood. And she's like, you know what time it is? We don't want to do that right now.
And I think there's teachable moments. I've told my kids all about me getting arrested. They know about it. And I know there's some people like, you worry about your kids. I'm like, I don't, because I could see the look in their eyes and they don't want that. My kids are so much smarter than I was. They look at me and they go, I don't want to do that stuff because I don't want to go through what you went through. I don't want to. And I don't think I wasn't that smart. I was looking for trouble a lot. And I'm seeing in their eyes that they're not rebellious like I was. I think because I'm being honest with them about really the pain of it. I'm not trying to make it worse than it was. I'm just telling them what it really was.
Yeah. And you're making it real. You're not candy coating it. Yeah. And I think the kids now, like I've been through some crazy with coaches early on, some sexual abuse that I talk about in my book. but I share that with my kids just to say, this is what happened, and it affected me, but I wanted to be a better person going through that experience. And like you said, whether it's, who we were, I mean, my sister passed probably about 20 years ago now, but, drugs and alcohol. And I share that with my kids because I was like, this is the path. I touched that for a second, but I had an example in my family, my sister who's 10 years older. So I watched all this and I remember I saw her walking and going, don't want that.
Yep.
But you're sharing that with your kids, which is huge. And dads, man, you got to get that. You got to have that conversation. You got to have that time. You got to schedule in that time and have the conversation about who we are. Don't look at your past going, oh, I don't want them to know that, because eventually it's going to come out, but share it with them because you don't want them to make the same decision and not have your opinion on it. Bottom line.
We had this conversation with my 12-year-old 2 weeks ago, and it was about lying. We caught him in a couple of lies. And what I explained to him, and I could be like, oh, you should not lie. Or, what I said was, you really will get away with it most of the time. And just but here's the problem. When you do get caught, now you've been lying, that 1 out of 10 times that you've lied, that you got caught, you lied 9 times before that. You got better at it, which means you got comfortable with it. So when you finally do get caught, that's the guy that's busted in the car, stealing that car, not the pack of gum. And then it's big. And so you actually get used to it and you train yourself to think it's okay. And blah, blah, blah. So it's like, it was a real conversation that nobody ever had with me about like, yeah, you probably will get away with most of the lies. And like, oh, okay, maybe that's good. No, it's not good because you're becoming a better liar. But when you will get caught, and when you do get caught, it's worse.
Wow, what a great way to explain it. Yeah, and that's you, especially to a 12-year-old. They'll get that, especially when it starts out with the small stuff.
It was a really great conversation. It was very powerful for all of us.
So let's fast forward. Let's get into, meeting your wife. Did she get involved in the business right away? How did that work? And then incorporate your kids a little bit on how you work with your kids in and around your business, which is awesome.
Yeah. It's funny. My wife and I met in college, Ohio University. So we were in classes together, and then we got a job at a newspaper together. We were both newspaper photographers, and then we started the business together. So we've pretty much, since we've met, have done everything together. But the business came about because of desperation when we were having our first kid. It was not a plan. We never set out to be entrepreneurs at all. I was a newspaper photographer. That's what I want. That's when I was traveling. I was covering the Colts, Rams, Titans when I was in Indiana. And I was shooting Super Bowls and all that type of stuff. But, and this is a big part of the book, was I had just won International Sports Photographer of the Year. Like I was in little Evansville, Indiana, and second place was Los Angeles Times, and third place was Sydney, Australia. So this is the big thing. We're having a kid. 2 months from now, I've got the biggest sports award that I could win. And I went in for my evaluation, and they read off all the stuff that I'd done. What an incredible year. And I got a 3% raise. And they said, well, you should be lucky because everybody else got nothing, but you did so well. And I remember thinking, and I said it out loud to my boss, I said, well, 3% of your salary might be something. I was making $32,000 a year. I'm like, 3% of nothing is nothing. I remember saying that to him out loud. Like I could have probably got fired. And he said, we did the best we could. And I'll never forget. I got up, and this was in June, and Andrew was being born in July. And I was standing under his door frame, and I remember saying, it's over. Like, this is my dream. That ever since that night with my dad, I said, this is my dream career. And I said, it's over. I said, I know if I continue doing this the same way, that I'll be 65 years old and I'll be complaining like everybody else here. I'll just be complaining about my career and about my coworkers and about my bosses won't do this for me and they don't budget this. So I walked back and I went home that day, literally went home that day, and I called my dad, and I had 2 conversations with my dad that changed my life. And this was the second one. And I called him and I said, I told him what was going on, and he didn't sugarcoat it. He wasn't like, oh, your boss is a jerk. He didn't say anything like that. He said, you have a talent. He said, you have a skill, but you are not using it correctly. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, you have this thing where you're winning these awards and you're making no money, but yet we've told you all these years you could shoot weddings or corporate work and make 10 times as much money, but you refuse to do it. Because I was a journalist, right? I'm too good to shoot weddings. That's the way that we looked at it. And so I called. I said, okay. And I listened to him, and I picked up the phone book, and I called like 10 photographers, and they all said no. I said, can I assist you? Can I help you? They all said no. Because I didn't want to have my own business, right? I wanted to work for somebody else. That's what I was trained. So I took the phone book. I'll never forget. I threw it against the wall and I said, if you can't beat them, join them is what they said. And I was like, if you can't join them, beat them. That's what I said to myself. And I was completely like, I still remember being the sun coming through. It was so hot. I was sweating. We started our business that day. And Andrew was born 3 weeks later. And we were, broke and desperate. And so that's our really exciting. Like, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to have this type of life. It was complete desperation.
What a blessing that 3% raise. Now I'm going to turn it around into a what if it was 5 or 8 and you would have said, I'll ride it out for the next couple years. Thank God that it was a 3% raise.
I literally wrote that at the end of the first part of the book. I said, and this comes down to everybody. It's not just me. It's everybody else. It's what would have happened if I would have gotten what I wanted. And I wrote 10%. What if I would have gotten 10%? I would have stayed there. I would have made just a little bit more money. We would have swallowed that up in some other expense. I would have still been working the same hours. It would have gotten worse. I mean, if you follow the newspaper industry, it would have gotten worse and worse and worse.
Absolutely.
We would have been fighting more. Elizabeth would have been home. We would be like everybody else. But that not getting what we wanted was the best thing we could ever have gotten.
I do have a good strategy here. So when you get your book published and you get it released, write a nice little note around, not really regarding the 3%, but to that old boss, and just a little thank you, because if it wasn't for you, it may have been in a negative back then, but look today where you are. And that is incredible.
We're still friends. We comment on Facebook together, and
awesome.
I don't know if he knows the story. He's about to find out, because if you look at it on Amazon, literally that's the beginning of the story of it. So I kind of feel bad for him, because it wasn't him. He didn't. I mean, he's the one that recruited us. He's the one that hired us out of school. He was one of the best things that ever happened to our career in terms of the photography part. He was just, his hands were cut. His hands were tied. He couldn't give me any more money if he wanted to.
Wow, that is awesome. That is good stuff, man. That is good stuff. Love it. So talk about family life a little bit. Talk about your kids. Yeah. Do you take them on road trips? I know I'm a big fan of that. I love, whether it's someone that has a job, I encourage fathers to get out there and get their kids involved so they can have an idea of what's out there and what dad does for a living.
Oh yeah. And that's what the beautiful thing is. Andrew now is part of my job, part of his job now, we're just starting, is he's finding things for I'm on podcasts a lot now. So his job now that we pay him for is to find podcasts for me to get on, do the search, do that, so he can start being part of the business. Our 9-year-old's not quite there yet. They were mowing the lawn today. It was a good start.
Okay.
But it's the type of thing where our whole thing is like freedom. The whole book is Freelance to Freedom. It was to use this to get to the life that we wanted, which was to be with our kids. We started homeschooling 2 years ago. So we homeschool our kids. So we're together every day. We have breakfast together. We eat on the deck for dinner. It's wonderful. I do the work based around them. Like I basically say in terms of our photography, like you're paying us like you're asking me to leave my children. And I think it's one of the best things we ever said to ourselves. Because when we worked at a job where we had to take a training, I never thought like that. I'll work extra, but it's like if people took the mindset of like, you are literally asking me to leave my children, and I'm gonna do the work that justifies it, but I'm gonna be compensated for it, because this is the most valuable thing. So in terms of traveling, our dream, we had mentioned, like we went to Texas for a month. I talked to you earlier about that. The book comes out January 2nd. This is the most exciting part about that is we rented a house in Tucson, Arizona for a month from end of January through February, a place in California for the next month. And we're going to spend 3 or 4 months on the road right after the book publishes as a family, just traveling.
Wow. That is awesome. Great stuff. Now, is there work included on the trip? Okay.
Not shooting. I mean, my photography business is down to now when I shoot pro sports for what works well, for my schedule.
Yeah.
If we do weddings and corporate work, it's based around our schedule. So we won't take anything during that time. We'll just turn it all down. Which is part, I mean, I remember when we first started a business, I found a photographer named Kevin Swan. I remember looking at his website, and it was December and had red X through every day in December. And I was like, what? And I was just starting. We were broke as a joke. I'm like, what is it? And he basically said, we're taking the month of December off to spend time with our family. And I said, that's what I want right there. That, I don't know who this guy is, but I want that life. So now for the last 10 years, we've been building day by day to do that. So I think those are going to be great memories for the kids, for our family. And we're not going to regret, our time. We're gonna
Absolutely. Yeah. And that is huge. And one thing we do here at Game Changing Dads to encourage fathers to find the time, whether it's switching gears from a corporate job, finding something that you can get the family involved. Because my heart goes out to the folks that are working, 8, 10, 12-hour days or traveling for weeks or months at a time. And then all of a sudden they get home to a house full of strangers. And I heard that the other day, and it's super sad. But hey, awesome job on your compliment. I'm more excited to almost get where you are. And I've never even I take pictures with my phone, so I don't count. But
no, it's I think it's just fun. I don't think it, like, so many people are like, oh, I want to do what you're doing. It's like, just keep doing it. Like, whatever it is that you want to do, just keep going. That's the problem. I think some people are like, oh, there's not a reward. There's not enough money in it right away. It's like, if you follow your heart and you're helping other people and it's what you really want to be doing with your time, it will be worthwhile to do it. Whether it's taking pictures with your phone, it doesn't really matter. So I'm a long-term type of guy. Like I say it all the time. I'm like, my life is basically about what can I do the best today for myself and our family, and how does that make my life and our life that much better 3 years from now? I don't worry about that much more. I try not to.
Amen. Yeah. And that's good. That's good. I mean, simple, easy. And like you said, you gotta put in the time, you got to put in the work. Yeah. I meet a lot of folks out there that, hey, entrepreneur means start my own business in 3 months. You're in the black and profitable. I've never experienced that with about 10 different businesses.
Most people have not. That's I wrote about it because, like, the reason why we hear about it is because they're so rare. That's why you hear that work.
Absolutely. But like you said, I mean, you're passionate enough. You follow your dreams and you just keep doing it till it pops.
Yeah, exactly. If you listen to every success story, you read biographies, it's actually kind of boring because it's the same thing. It's a struggle and a day-to-day thing. And then eventually you get there, and then eventually somebody goes, "Oh, you're lucky." Like, no, I'm lucky I didn't get hit by a bus, and I'm lucky I was born, and I was, lucky for a lot of things, but not this part of it. This part of it, we worked really hard for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. No luck behind it. You just keep persistence and keep the working, which is awesome. That is good stuff. Well, let's do this. We're going to move into our rapid fire portion of the show, and remind me, we're going to ask where people can find you. And then we'll talk about your book a little bit. It's going to be released next year. Yeah. So rapid fire, we're going to go 1 through 5. And the first question is your favorite book.
Oh, can I go my book right now or all time?
It doesn't matter.
I'm reading a book called The Choice, Og Mandino. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's probably the 3rd time that I'm reading it this year. And it really is one of those books about life and family and about what's most important. And so whenever I start questioning, whenever things start getting a little out of control in terms of like businesses going, it's almost a thing when things go too well. If you don't make the right choices, you ruin everything that you really wanted. And it really keeps me in line in terms of the work that I'm doing and how I'm going to do it and how it's not going to separate me from my family. So that's absolutely. My friend Ken Carfagno recommended that to me, and I read that probably 4 times a year.
Wow, that is good. So it's good to reread, and I'm being sarcastic here, but it's good to reread books. Wow, what a concept.
Well, I know, I used to be one of them. Like, I want to read as many books as possible, and I'm actually in the phase now of just reading a book over it, just to really get what's in it.
To get it, yeah. Yeah, because you'll get so many more nuggets once you go through it the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th time, which is huge. Yeah. Love it.
Yep.
All right, number 2, favorite quote.
Yeah, this is great because I honestly, I could probably be on here every week, and every time it would be a different book and a different quote. Okay. But right now, because we've been saying it to our kids so much, is the old Henry Ford quote: "Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right." And I just love that because it really just shows like you have the ability to make it or to not make it. It really comes down to us.
That is good. I actually used that about an hour ago. That is a good one. Yes, with my 10-year-old. Number 3, favorite husband moment.
Oh, I think that there's so many. It all comes down to my wife. I married just such a wonderful person that she's been with me through all of my growth, and growth in a bad way. Like, I've had so much farther to come than she has. I had a lot of things to work through, but probably the day that we got engaged. I mean, I proposed to her in the newspaper. I literally wrote an article. And
Me too. That is awesome. Keep going. Yep. That's crazy.
we had a thing in the newspaper. It's called a Good Morning, and any photographer or reporter can write a story about something that happened. Well, I asked my boss, can I propose to Elizabeth in the paper? And they loved the idea, so I wrote the story, gave it to him. So it was really a special thing, and it was great because that day I never remember. A newspaper staff is a pretty grumpy staff overall. We always are. That was the happiest day. Everybody was walking around smiling. So that was the very beginning. I mean, that was 16 years ago, and there's way too many to count. But I think about that and her face and just the life that we've built from that. So that's pretty special.
That is pretty awesome. And I thought I was original with the whole nursepaper thing.
Me
but
too.
You were before me. So you see that? See,
oh, that's right. Well, but we didn't know each other. So it's all the same.
All right. Number 4, favorite dad moment.
Wow, these are so hard. Like, how do you? I'll give you a hard one. I'll give you not what you would think. We have 3 boys, and Andrew's 12 and Nolan's 9, and we were having Dylan is now 6. And when Elizabeth was pregnant with him, for instance, we booked we booked a wedding before we got pregnant with him, and it was at Louisville, Kentucky. It was 6 hours away, so she was not ready yet. But I'm leaving town to shoot this wedding, and literally the day before Father's Day. So I had this panic attack. Like, I'm going to not only be gone when he's born, but I'm going to miss his birth on Father's Day. I'm like the worst dad ever. Like, you miss. So I shot the wedding. I was calling like every half an hour, and I drove back all night drinking Red Bulls. And I got back. Little bugger he didn't come out for another 10 days. Like, he was just messing with us already. But when he was born, we went to the hospital. She wasn't ready yet, but we went there, and I can't remember how exactly it happened, but she was dilated. Everything was starting, and I'll never forget it as long as I live. The doctor just rushed into the room, and we were joking about photography. The doctor was all into it. She was asking us questions, and her face went white. And she said, those numbers have changed. His heart rate has dropped. She said, if things don't change in a minute, we're going to have to do emergency surgery. So I remember I looked in the mirror. I saw my face was white. She was so strong. She was like, whatever. I was like losing it. And so for the next 45 minutes, I'm getting like, we didn't know what was going on. Like the doctors, wow. They wouldn't tell me anything. They just said, everything they said was very cryptic. So I'm sitting here thinking, I'm losing my wife. I'm losing my son who I haven't met. I sat there. Both of my knees were bouncing so fast that I couldn't even hold them down with my hands. And I remember looking at the wall, and I took a picture of the wall, and I said, next time you want to complain, please. I remember praying, like, if we get out of this, I won't complain anymore. And I'll never forget hearing a scream of a baby's voice. And then I remember it might not be him because there were other births going on. And then the nurses came out with this smile, and they were just crying like, he's beautiful. And that, so from that point, it just changed my, he came out beautiful, happy, and he's been smiling ever since that. So wow. You talk about a perspective change. That was it for me.
Wow, that's an incredible story. You almost had me crying there, dude. I'm a big crier, buddy. That was close. Wow. Yeah. Sometimes, yeah. Like you said, you just looked at that wall and just, yeah. So I don't complain anymore, right?
No, I do. But I try to think about that. You do your best, and I will tell myself, like, don't remember that. Whatever you're complaining about now is nothing compared to that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Well, number 5, can you share one piece of awesome game-changing advice with our listeners today? And don't get me wrong, you just shared a ton of it, so I don't know where you're going to pull this one out of.
I think it comes down to time. I think time with your kids and with your, I think so many of us dads like, well, we have to make the money. We have to, we got to pay the bills. And those bills are generally things that we've chosen. It doesn't take that much to live. And nobody really wants to say that. But when you go, well, we have the car payment. That's a car payment that you took on, chose to. Your house, well, we needed a house. We justify everything. And I'll never forget when I worked for the World Wrestling Federation, which is a whole nother episode. Dave McClain was a National Geographic photographer. He's one of the photographers I worked in. I remember him saying he backpacked across India, and he said those were the happiest people he'd ever met. And I was like, how? Because I remember I was like in my 20s. I'm like, that sounded crazy. They didn't have that much, but they were a family, and they were close, and they didn't feel like they even missed anything. And I feel like so much in this culture, we spend all of our time at work or at games or doing activities or putting kids in activities, and we don't even have dinner together as families. And
Mm.
it's like time with the kids. That's what they value, not the money. So that's if there's
Wow.
one thing, that would be it.
That is awesome, man. Yeah, that's a great piece of information there. Appreciate that. Appreciate sharing from the heart too.
Yeah.
It's obvious. Let's do this. Tell us about your book, and then where can people find you?
Yeah, the book is, thank you for asking. The book is pretty much wrapped up in terms of a lot of what we've been talking about is basically our journey from, living a life of, we were 140 grand in debt. We were making no money, having a family, and working a job that we weren't happy with, to basically changing our mindset and doing these things, a lot of things that we talked about, and a lot that we haven't gotten to build a life of time, money, and just location freedom. So that's the journey. So the first half is our journey, how we did it. And then I break it down into 5 phases of how you get there. So that's in a nutshell. There's a lot more to it, but
Awesome. And where can people find you?
Oh, you can go to my website, vincentpugliese.com, if you could even pronounce it or spell it. Hopefully there's a link. And
We will do show notes. Yes.
all right. And our photography is Elizabeth Vincent Photography. That's easier. And I did a gift for if your guests are interested. I did a 7-part email course about the book. If anybody was interested, because there's 7, I basically took parts of the book and I put it into a course that people can get just actionable steps that they can start on their way to this. So if anybody wants it, I'll send it to you that you can share with any of your audience.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to get into your book, especially with the travel freedom. My wife and I, conversation over and over. We kind of have it dialed in, but then we don't. And we definitely have to fine tune some things. So I am super excited. But Vince, greatly appreciated being on the show and being that awesome rock star, game-changing dad. And if you want to join us next Tuesday, we will have a special guest, and I am not going to announce it just to keep you on the edge of your seat. And we thank you so much for joining us. And Vince, what a professional. Appreciate your time. And I want you all to have a great and blessed week. Take care.